Okay, so today's lecture is dealing with dimensioning and multi-liters. And dimensioning is a really interesting aspect in AutoCAD. It's very easy to do. It's very style driven, and lots of people and lots of disciplines use dimensions really rigorously. And then other people are a little bit looser about it. So I think mechanical engineers, people of that persuasion, they have really rigorous enforcements, rules of what they use when they dimension. And civils and architects, we tend to be a little looser. So you typically won't see two architects dimension a drawing the same way. The information will be there, but it's just not usually done as rigorously following guidelines. And in civils, we probably are even looser because we just don't use them quite as much. But we are going to have the occasional time that we want to do that, so we definitely want to know how to do dimensions. So let's start out. I'm just going to show you something real quick. You don't need to do this, but I'm just going to generate a real quick, a little bit smaller. Okay, so as we look at this, you can see how easy that was. I just basically picked 2 points. This is in the AutoCAD world referred to as a dimension. And when we hear the term dimension, some people think that it's just the numeric part of it. Okay, so we'll say that, well, what's the dimension on that part? And it's like, well, it's 5 inches by 4 inches. Okay, and that's one way of defining the word or using the word dimension. But in AutoCAD, this object right here is called a dimension or a dimension object. And there's several different types of dimensions that you have. So you don't have just one type of dimension. We'll go through those here in a sec. So this is a primary base type of dimension, which we might call a linear dimension. And if you notice, when I put my cursor up there, it actually called it a rotated dimension, which is a subset of a type of linear. So it functions first off as one object. So if I click on it, it's all one object. Now this thing can be blown apart, and if you blow it apart, what you're going to do is destroy it. So that's kind of the worst thing you would ever do to a dimension is blowing it apart, what you call exploding it, because then it no longer functions as a dimension. So a couple things about this guy. There's some terminology that's really key to it. Think of it as it's composed of parts, okay? And some people may know the part names or may not, so I'm going to go through those with you. So the first thing is this line right here, okay, right here, and this line right here. This is referred to as an extension line. And typically there's two, one on each end, one here, but it's possible to do what we call suppress them. So you can have one extension line here and no extension line here, or vice versa, or you can have no extension lines, period. So normally you're going to have two extension lines. Not all dimensions will have extension lines, so it just depends on the type. So we'll see that. So this guy right here, this is called dimension line itself. So that's the dimension line. And typically the idea is that the dimension line and the extension line are 90 degrees with respect to each other. And that's not always true either. We can actually have what's called an oblique dimension. I will show you that later today. And this angle can be something less than that. So again, that's frowned on by some disciplines, but civils, we use the oblique kind of concept. So I've seen that used quite a bit actually. So this dimension line, notice it actually is in two parts, one here and one here. And that depends on where this text is sitting. So you could have this piece suppressed and that piece visible, or both of them turned off. So you've got different ways you can do it. If you have the text on top or on the bottom of the dimension line, then it's basically just one dimension line. Okay, so again, that's all going to be governed by that thing called a dimension style, which is going to be a pretty critical thing. Okay, at the end of the dimensions, you'll see there are two things here. That's called an arrowhead or a dimension arrowhead. And you notice there's one on each end of the extension line, or the dimension line, excuse me. There's different formats to the way these guys look. So these are what are called closed filled arrowheads. You can have open arrowheads. You can have what's called a dot. You can have what's called an architectural tick. There's probably about 20 or 30 different styles of arrowheads, and these are what we call blocks, which we'll be discussing next week. And you could actually create your own personal arrowheads if you don't like what AutoCAD has provided for you. We can turn them off. We can turn them on. We can have an arrowhead on one side different than an arrowhead on the other. So it's just kind of how it works. So this guy right here, this is called dimension text. So it's actually a piece of text that gets that information is harvested from the point that you dimension, and then as you lay it down, it becomes part of the dimension. So if you want to edit this, what you're actually editing is an mText object. So this is actually an mText object, and I will show you that when we get into the dimension editing today. Okay. One other key thing here, there's a little dot. I hope you guys can see that right there. There's a dot there, and there's a dot there. That's what's referred to as a definition point. That's what really is doing the measurement. So between that definition point and that definition point is what this dimension actually is. And the def points are kind of unique. They look like they're showing up here. They do on the screen, but they will never print because they will go on their own layer. When you create a dimension, if I drop up here, notice there's a dimension layer there called def points. So those def points actually get dropped on the def point layer, and it is an automatic no plot. In fact, you cannot make that layer plot. So any other object that you would tend to put on that layer will not plot. For that reason, some people will actually use the def points layer to put their viewports on, because that's a good way of making sure that you have a no plot viewport. So, all right, so we have extension lines, dimension lines, arrowheads, dimension text, and def points. Okay, so what we're going to do is what I would like you to do. I'm just going to kill this drawing, and I want you to go back to your Blackboard site, and under that you can just go ahead and open up this demo drawing if you haven't already, and it should look like that. Okay, so we're going to use that to create some dimensions. Okay, I'll give everybody a sec to do that. And what I've done on this drawing is created my parts on the 0 layer, and they're white. We open up the layer, we should see that we have no other layers there. Okay, and we don't have any dimension layers because we have never dimensioned. So the first time you ever create a dimension, you're going to get that def points layer. And one thing about that layer, it's very hard to get rid of. So once you get it in there, it's kind of like it stays there forever kind of thing. Okay, does everybody have that downloaded? Anybody problems with that?
Mine came in, it said it was read only.
That's okay. You're not going to save it, and if you do need to save it, you can just do a save as. Okay.
I'll be able to dimension it though.
Yep, you'll be able to do everything. And if, like I said, if you want to save it, if you go up here and try to save it with your save command, it's going to tell you it's read only. But if you do want to save it to look at it further, you can just come back here and do a save as. You'll just have to give it a new name. Okay. So that's, anytime that happens, by the way, that's not a problem. It just doesn't let you save it to the drawing that you're currently working on. Okay, good call on that. All right. So I always like to create a dimension, or a layer, excuse me, so that I can manage my layers, or my objects, my dimension objects. So what I'm going to do is come up here to the layer control dialog box, and we're going to create a new layer, the layer manager, I guess I should say. And make it another color other than white, something that you can see on the screen very nicely. I think you guys will be able to see my green. If you don't, let me know, we can change that. So I'm gonna make it a different color and also make it current because we want to generate these guys on that layer, okay? So it should have your layer name up here with its color showing up. All right, so where do we find dimensions? There's two places you can find them very readily. Under the Home tab, in the Annotation panel, you have this Quick Dimension command, which is, this will create multiple types of dimensions depending on what you pick. So it's not a good command to use right off the bat if you don't know what you're doing with dimensioning, because it kind of just does what it wants to. So next to it, we have the dimension tools. And so these are the primary types of dimension creation tools that you have. We have what's called a linear, which allows you to do horizontal and vertical and rotated dimensions. You have aligned, which will basically be a rotated dimension that'll be parallel with the part that you're dimensioning. So it's a little bit better to use than a linear if it's an angular type of thing. Angular will provide for you an angle, so it'll give you like a degrees, minutes, seconds kind of thing. All right, so that's between two lines, as long as they're not parallel. Arc length will create a length of arc distance or the bent distance along an arc or a circle. I believe even it'll do it on an ellipse. Radius and diameter do exactly what they imply. They're going to give you readings, values on your circles, and again arcs, and I think ellipses as well. Then you have this thing called ordinate, which most civil people wouldn't use, so we're not even going to consider, but it's kind of like from an origin, XY origin, you can come over and give it. So a lot of machine people would use that. Mechanical, that's a little bit more common. And then this is a jogged, what they call a jog dimension, which occurs when you have what's called a false radius. So if your radius is, let's say, a mile long, and there's no way you're going to show that on your paper, you can show what's called a false radius, and you can see in that little diagram how that 0.2 that they're showing you there is actually the false radius point. It's not the actual radius point, but it'll give you the true radius value of what you're dimensioning. Okay, so those are your ways to create. Now, if you go to the Annotate tab, you have more options, and there's a whole dimension panel here. Most of this is going to be dimension editing, so we're going to jump over this here a little bit later. But notice that you have, there's your dimension creation tools right there. Linear, aligned, angular, same ones. Okay. So if I'm just doing simple dimensioning, I'm going to stay on the home panel. So we can go either way right now. Okay, so we're gonna shoot. We're gonna put the. If you have that one diagram, let me go back to this. Let me see. This one here. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to just kind of work across the bottom here. So the first one I want to do is place this 3-inch dimension. So we're going to go up here. Oh, we'll just go back to the Home tab. We're going to do this guy called a linear. So once you select that, it'll ask you to specify first extension line origin or select the object. So you actually have two ways of creating this dimension. Now, if you're using points, you should use O-snaps. So down here, if you don't have your O-snap turned on, turn it on, but also go ahead and set your endpoint to a current running O-snap. So that when I come over here now, if I just select that, notice the O-snap pops up and the other O-snap pops up. So once I do that, my dimension shows up, and then it's just asking me to place the location of the dimension line. So I'm just going to drag it down to a point, left click, and there's my dimension. So it's literally that easy, what we call point and shoot. Okay, is everybody getting that to work?
Yep.
If we look at this dimension, if you zoom up, you might see your def point. There's a def point sitting there. It's embedded underneath that. And maybe, let me see if I can freeze I'm going to freeze my 0 layer. I don't know if you can see my def point, but it's truly sitting there. So there's a def point on each end. There's also one down here. Okay, so those are important. Now they do show up the same color as whatever your current layer is, but they actually, again, are going on the depth point layer. And again, they will never plot. So if we want to bring another dimension next to this one, we just click that again. We could pick endpoint, endpoint, and then to line these up, we can snap endpoint there and we can get these guys lined up. Okay, so again, it's just that simple. So let's think about this here. I brought in a dimension on this side. I brought in a dimension on this side. How many objects do you think you have here? Anybody have a clue? 1 or 2?
I'd guess 2.
You're right. Okay, so what you have is an extension line on top of an extension line. Now, I sometimes beat you guys to death about the duplicate objects, and I don't, in general, like duplicate objects. This case, because when they print, I'm never going to see the duplicate object. I don't get as worried about that in terms of suppressing one of those extension lines. Used to be back in the day when you were using a printer, you really did want to get rid of them because the printer would actually draw a line here and then it would draw a line here twice, and you could actually see the difference in the thickness between the two. But the way the printers work now, there's not an issue. All right, so that one's pretty straightforward.
Mr. Decker,
Yes.
on my 3-inch, my extension line didn't come down like your extension line by the 10.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed up top. I don't know if there's a setting.
Did you pick it up here?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you what's happening there. When you did that one and that one?
Yes.
And then that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just the location of where your depth point is.
Okay.
Okay, so, but what you notice, Shelley, and this is a good point, this would be bad practice right here. Okay,
Right.
So this is something that you wouldn't want to do, and I'm going to show you how to edit that. But in general, watch how easy this is to fix. If I click on this dimension, see his depth point right here?
Yes.
Click on that, and then bring him down here.
Okay.
Hit the escape key. So that is one way of fixing that depth point location. Okay. That's a very simple edit, and you're going to use that kind of a lot. That's what's called grip editing. And I'm going to show you there's a lot of really cool tools when we get into grips, particularly on dimensions. I will tell you this, I've been playing back and forth with AutoCAD and Civil 3D, and some of the grip functionality in Civil 3D for dimensions don't work the same way they do in AutoCAD, so they must be tweaking system variables, yeah, that are making it do different things. So it kind of drives you nuts. Okay, did it work for you?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, perfect. All right, so notice when we're generating dimensions like that, that's very much, you have to pick and click a lot. All right, so there's another way you can do it that the AutoCAD can find that number for you very easily. So if you just come up here to your linear dimension, and instead of selecting an origin, just hit the enter key. Now it asks you to just select the object you want to dimension. So I just come over here and I select that line, and it finds the depth points for me, and then I just pick it. So it's a little bit easier to use. I don't have to pick endpoint to endpoint. Okay, and I really need to emphasize this. If you do not use depth points and you're just eyeballing the depth point location, you don't really get a dimension where you think you are. Okay, it's just dimensioning where it wants to. All right, so don't eyeball dimensions. You always want to use depth points, or you want to select the object itself. Okay, do you guys get that to work?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really cool tool. So again, you have depth point location, or you just select the object. And again, here, notice this is a problem right here, right? Because I've got this would be something I don't want to deal with. There's going to be a couple of ways to hide this, so I'm going to show you a couple of methods, but we'll get to that when we do editing. Okay, so notice across the top, let me come back to here. So notice we have this is referred to as a string of dimensions, and you started with one, and then you just continue across. Well, I don't want to do it the way I just did it, because I have to pick a point, and then I have to line them up with another point, and pick a point and line it up. There's a tool in here that will do that for you. And that tool That tool is what's referred to as a continuous tool. So the easiest place to find that is to go into your Annotate tab. And you have two tools right here. One's called Continue and the other one's called Baseline. We're going to take a look at both of these. But what we're going to do is we want to place a linear down first, and then we're going to continue off of that. Okay. So again, we place a baseline, or we place a linear type of dimension first, and then we're going to come off of that. So what I'm going to do is do a linear, and I'm going to pick this point first and this point second, and then I'm going to pick it down here. Okay, now specifically what I said was very important because the continue tool works off of the second def point. So if I picked this as the first point and this is the second one, and then I continued in this direction, it's going to have dimensions on top of the other ones. You can change that, but it's usually just try to remember that when you pick it, you'll want to go def point 1, def point 2, and the continue comes off at 2. If you pick the object, make sure that you pick the object closer to this end than this end, because it'll determine which way is the def point. Okay, so now we're going to go in here to continue, and notice it automatically knows what I'm talking about. So I just pick an endpoint, I pick an endpoint, I pick an endpoint, and then I just hit enter. So that's a really slick little tool. It's just generating those linears right off of the first linear. Is everybody getting that to work?
Yep.
And notice duplicate extension lines, duplicate extension lines, duplicate extension lines, and of course we've got an extension line over top of an object. So again, that's not ideal, but we can take a look at that, and we can fix that later. Okay, so we're going to look at another way of doing multiple dimensions, which is referred to as a baseline dimensioning. Now, this is this continued dimensioning is very common in the civil world, particularly architecture. Architects use this string kind of concept quite often. I don't see this one though used as much by civils, but this is what's referred to as baseline dimensioning right here. This is your baseline, and what you're doing is everything's coming off the same baseline. So what you're going to see is extension line, and then extension line. So depending on how many you have, you're going to have multiple extension lines there. So again, this is probably more used by mechanical guys than civils, but I'm going to show you this one too. So this one works a little different. The baseline comes off of the first def point, not the second. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop a linear from that point to that point and just pull them out. And then we're going to come in and baseline off of that. So under the continue option, you will see the baseline option. So notice then I just pick an endpoint, and I can just keep going until I'm done. And then I just going to hit either enter or escape. Okay, so there's your baseline. And you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3 extension lines. So again, you can edit those things down. It's not that hard to do, but it just takes a little bit of time because you have to do it manually. The thing is the dimensions are pretty cool, but they're not going to necessarily be intelligent enough to be able to understand that they're sitting on top of each other. I think at some point that may come, but it's not happening yet. And what you might notice here is that this has a 4 decimal place precision, and that number is almost hitting that dimension line. So this is getting a little too big. And what's driving all this, this automatic space is happening due to what's called a dim style setting. The precision is all your dimension style. So we can change a lot of that stuff after the fact. Okay, is everybody getting that kind of stuff to work?
Yep.
All right, so we've done linears. This is a horizontal linear. This is a vertical linear. And then this is a continue. And then this is a baseline type. Okay, so we're going to take a look at what happens if we want to do diagonal like this. Okay, so if we do a linear and we just select this object, notice what's going to happen. It's either going to want to go horizontal or it's going to want to go vertical, but it's never going to go diagonal, which is what I might want to actually be dimensioning. Well, you might notice down below in here, there are some kinds of things that you can get into. You can actually either give it a rotated value. And what this will do, if I go rotated, I can actually pick a point and another point, and then it knows what part I'm actually coming off of, or which, I guess, what line's parallel. And then I can also, instead of picking 2 points, I could enter an angle. So I could say like 30 degrees. So for instance, if I did that again, I could do this, pick that guy, go to rotated, and then tell it I want it to be 30 degrees. And you can notice it can come in like that. So you don't use this rotated option too often, but that is a way of doing it. Now, if you want this dimension line to be truly parallel with this, the best way to do that is what's called an align dimension. Instead of having to either pick two objects, to line it up with or give it an angle, your best option is what this is called an align. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And we're going to open up linear, and under that you'll notice there's a dimension aligned command. So all I have to do is, again, it's like a linear. You just either pick the two endpoints or you pick the object and you get that true value, okay? So again, from our standpoint, probably the civil guy's standpoint, we're going to use the aligned a lot more often than say a linear rotated, okay? Any questions on that?
Yeah, so when you specified the angle, it gave you the dimension at that angle.
Yes, yes.
Not the actual
length. Right. So that's important to understand, because we don't normally want to have it at some weird angle. Now, why you might want that is maybe you've got a baseline that's running 30 degrees, okay? So, I mean, there are reasons to do that, but probably not too often in our world, okay? That might be for other disciplines, they're going to use that. But I pretty much truly want this number to reflect what the distance of that line is, okay? And that's what you're pointing out there, which is really important, okay? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, those numbers didn't match.
They didn't.
They
didn't.
Yeah.
Now, I could continue off of this. Watch, if I go ahead and do a continue off of this, I can continue. Oops, I did a baseline. I don't want a baseline. If I can continue off of that and notice what it's doing. It is now running along that line, okay? But you can notice that number, of course, doesn't agree with that because it's really shooting the leg of that triangle right there, okay, calculating that. So this would not be a common type of way of doing things. Just wouldn't be that common. But this is very common right here for us, okay? Any questions? I'm gonna go ahead and delete those. We good so far, everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So again, point and shoot, right? It's pretty simple. Now, making these things do exactly what you want them to do, that's where we get into a little bit more stuff that we have to talk about. So we're getting there. So I want to do a couple other types real quick now. All right, so let's look at this one called angular. So angular is going to give me an angle value in whatever my unit setting would be. So I have 5 units. I could be in decimal degrees, degrees, minutes, seconds, radians, grades, or grads. I think they've got one other one. Okay, but it won't do bearings. Okay, unfortunately. So, but Civil 3D is going to do bearings. That's going to handle bearings and azimuths for you real nicely. So let's take a look at angular. There's 2 methods of doing angular. So when you pick angular, the first thing it says, either select an arc, a circle, or a line. So I'm just going to select this line, and I'm going to select that line. And notice if I put it over here, I get 45 degrees. If I bring it this way, it gives me 135. If I bring it out this way, I get 45. And if I bring it this way, it gives me 135. And also notice this one is intelligent. So I like this because it knows that there's an extension line out here, but there's not going to be extension line on the line. So notice when I bring this in here, it deletes the two extension lines, but out here it puts them in. So this one has intelligence built into it. It's kind of cool. So if I decide to bring it over here, I just click it right there. Okay. Now there are def points. There's a def point there, and there's a def point there, and there's actually a def point there. Okay. You guys get that to work?
Yep.
Okay, now, did anybody see that's a minor arc, but it would not let me do the major arc? Did everybody see what I'm talking about? It won't let me say 315. Again, let me do that again. Notice if I pick that and I pick that, I can do 45, I can do 135, I can do 45 or 135, but it won't let me say 315.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, okay, well there's a little trick, okay? So let's go ahead and place the 45. So if you want to do the major arc, you have to do what's called a vertex option, okay? So you go to Angular, and you notice there's an option there that says specify vertex. Well, what we're going to do is hit enter to specify vertex. So we're going to pick again with those snaps. You have to be really picky with those snaps. So I'm going to pick that as the vertex right there. And then this is going to be like a back sight and a foresight. And then I can do either the minor arc or the major arc. And when I do the minor arc, I can even line them up, okay? And you can see what's happening there. Now this one, unfortunately, is not intuitive. You'll notice he actually brought in extension lines with him. So this one isn't as nice because you're going to have to handle those extension lines. If you don't want them on that object, you're going to have to suppress them or something like that. So there's just the two options. You either select the object, you know, or you're going to be able to do, which basically just gives you acute angles or what you might refer to as a deflection angle. And then if you do the vertex option, you're going to be able to get major arc, minor arc out of that one. Okay, do you guys get that to work? That's important to know because this can drive you nuts if you don't know how to do it. All right, we good?
Yeah.
All right, let's check out some other things now. I want you to go back to the home tab for me. And let's set up the 0 layer, just make that current. We're gonna draw a couple of objects off to the side. So go ahead and grab a circle and don't worry about how big it is. I'm just gonna make a circle kind of over here. And I'm gonna do an arc, and I'm just gonna do this 3-point arc. So I'm gonna pick, pick, and pick. So you have those two objects. And then we're gonna come over here and make this the current layer back again, okay? Okay, so we're in the home tab. We're going to use just the simple annotate tools here. So I'm going to go up here, open this guy up, and we have what's called radius and diameter. These are very simple to use. So you just select radius, pick your circle or your arc or your ellipse, and it just generates it like this. If I bring it inside, it'll make a little bit different look to it. So if I pull it out like this, there you see that. And what you have is this guy. This is pointing towards the center. So this always points towards the center. It won't do it any other way. And that's the proper way of doing it. This doesn't really have extension lines associated with it. So this is just basically your dimension line, your arrowhead, and then your text. Now, one thing about this, you can edit the text, but you can't edit the R. The R is hard coded into it. So you can, in other words, I can make that text say 2.29 inches, but I can't get rid of the R, okay? And I know that's, when I say that, I'm sure there is a way to do it, but you have to really know how to go into the back door to do it. So there's a lot of tricks once you get into some of this stuff, but I've never found an easy way to get that. And also notice this guy is part of this dimension. So if you go in there and try to erase that, you're going to erase the dimension. Okay, so there's also a way to get rid of that, and you can suppress this thing. And this is what's referred to as a center mark, and it'll have another look called a center line, and you can also set it to none. So those are settings that we will get into when we get into the dim styles. Now, notice if you drag this guy to the inside, it can look like that, but then notice it actually turns the center mark off. So you can see a def point sitting there, but that won't print. So depending on where this guy's set is going to depend on where you're going to get a center mark or not. All right. Questions on that? Real easy. If we look at the diameter, we just pick the circle, and again, I can pull it out this way, I can pull it inside, and notice if I drag them together, and that symbol, the circle with the line through it, that's your symbol for diameter, and that is also hard coded on there, so you can't get that out of there. So that's a really tough thing. Okay. Now making radius and diameters look like the way you might want to, that's a little bit difficult. There's a lot of settings that have to go in to make these guys look like that. So the good news is we don't have to like do a lot of that to edit them down, but you know, you are going to play with some of that as we get into that. So those are simple. Okay. Let's come over here for our arc. Now you could do the same thing on the arc. So if I went to let's say radius, I could pick that, pull my radius out, and there's my radius. Okay. So wanted to show you one thing. If you wanted to do what's called a jog radius, it basically is going to give me this, well, it's going to give me the exact same number, but instead of, you can see where the radius value is. Let's say that radius was really long, it was way down there, and we're never going to see it. But we can show the false radius by using the jogged option. So what you would do is you would go here for a jog dimension. You select your arc or circle first. You pick the point of where you want the false radius to be. And then you get this kind of guy, looks and shows up, and it can just kind of come in there like that. And then you place that. So what that's showing you is these are exactly the same numbers because it's it's harvesting the information from that object. But you know, the actual location of that is here, and I gave it a false radius of here. So this is a case where you, like I said, you might have it, if I'm in a window or a viewport, and I don't want this line to extend past it, I can just do this false type of thing. So that's called a jog dimension. They actually have a new one out there called a jogged linear. So this is a jogged radius. I don't use this too often. Okay, so you can go ahead, if you did those with me, go ahead and delete that. And I'm going to delete this. So I want to show you a couple of things about arcs too. There's two linear distances associated with this arc. One would be called the arc length, and one would be called the chord length. Okay. So if we did the chord length on here, on this guy, that would be the straight line distance from the end point of that to the end point of that. So we would do that with an aligned dimension. So if I do that and that, that's my chord length. Now if I used a linear, horizontal, or vertical, that would not give me a chord length. Okay. Now, then there's the bent distance around this thing. So if you imagine taking a steel tape and instead of doing it from endpoint to endpoint, you're bending it along the arc, you're going to get a different number. And technically, it should be longer. So they have a nice tool here called the arc length tool. You just pick your arc and you just pull it out. Now, it also hard codes that into it. And that one actually can be removed. That's kind of weird because this one is that little symbol can be gotten rid of, but in this case it's on. All right, so notice that these should be different values. Chord should always be less than the arc length. Is everybody getting that to work?
Which one was it for chord? Which command?
The chord, you would use the aligned linear. You
Okay,
wouldn't,
that's not real intuitive, but got it.
okay. Well, here's the thing. Let me do something here. If I draw a line from there to there, is it intuitive? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yep, yep.
So you've got to envision when you have an arc or a circle or something like that, what you're getting is the chord on that piece right there. See? Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Now, does anybody's look like mine here? Or does it look different on the, does it look different? Do you notice how these are lining up?
Yeah, mine does. Mine didn't do that.
Well, it shouldn't do that. Okay. Technically, this guy should be pointing in towards the radius, and that one should be pointing in towards the radius. And sometimes, I don't know why, but sometimes there'll be like rays expanding out, and sometimes it does this. This is technically incorrect, okay? Technically that line should be going like that, and it should be going like that. But sometimes AutoCAD just does it, and I don't know if it's the way I pick it. Let me see if I get it to do it again. Yeah, mine sometimes once it does it, it will never do it, and sometimes it'll do it right. You know. But anyway, the number you're getting there is correct, okay? The number you're getting there, that's correct, but that's just not the correct portrayal of the way it should look. Does everybody get the idea of what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't have any control over that. I don't know what controls it, So
I
like
wonder
I
if
said,
it's a function of the arc length.
it might be, or really it may be a function of the radius. But technically, though, still it just shouldn't be doing that. So I've never figured out why that is. But all right. So anyway, so let's so those are the major things we're going to do here. Now I wanted to show you something. These dimensions are linked to these objects, okay, which is really, really cool. So what that means is if your objects move, your dimensions will update with them. So if you come and select that line, and you grip that grip, and you drag that grip out, notice your dimensions will go with it, and they update automatically. So that's what we call an associative dimension. Works the same thing with my arc. I drag my arc, get my things to update and edit. Oh, there I got it to work. That's what it should look like. If I change the location of my circle, my dimensions move with it. If I change the size of that circle, the dimensions move with it. So everything is really cool because they will dimension and update for you automatically. That's pretty awesome. So, oh, wow, I really whacked those out. All right, you guys getting how that works? That's one really cool little tool. You can turn what we call associativeness off, which would be kind of a foolish thing to do, but it can be done. All right, any questions so far?
Yeah, for that vertex when we did the big angle,
Yeah.
what was that number?
What was the what?
The number?
This number?
Yeah, so when you press the angle and
Oh,
then
let
you
me erase mine, okay? Okay, so I went to what I'm doing is angular, right?
Yes.
And then you just select enter, and it should ask you to specify your vertex angle, right?
Yeah.
So the vertex angle is this guy right here.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm going to use, again, use an O-snap. Make sure you use an O-snap. Don't eyeball it. So I'm going to use that as my vertex. Think of that as like backsight, foresight, and then you can just place it.
Okay, I got
Is it
it.
working now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Anybody else? Because that's the easy part. What we just did. That's the creation part. Okay. So let's. We're going to take a look at some editing tools. Okay. So first off, you can explode dimensions. All right. And some people consider that a way of editing. And and I don't, because when you explode a dimension, you've killed it, okay? So did everybody put this vertical dimension here, right? And if you don't, go ahead and just drop that vertical dimension for me so you can see that you got that extension line on top of that green line, or the object that we've got laid out there. Is that good for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, so go ahead and select that dimension. Okay, notice that he's a full-blown dimension, so he's going to edit. And if we come up here to the explode option, it doesn't look any different. But if you come up here now, you'll notice, well, that's now a line, that's a line, that's a piece of text. So you've destroyed that dimension. And if this line moves, the dimension just stays put because it's no longer associated with that. It's got nothing to do with it anymore. But I could say, well, I can clean that up now. I can get rid of that. So if this dimension is never going to change and I never need to change it, I mean, that might be a way of handling it. But in the future reference, if that part ever needs to change or something, this dimension is just dead. So that's, to me, that's not an editing tool. Okay, I would not consider exploding editing. So you can go ahead and I'm going to just delete it out. All right, so we have ways of editing all different aspects of dimensions. So the best way of editing is not under home, because really all of the tools under the annotate are just your dimension creation tools. And the other one that we'll find here is this guy, which is called a dim style. Now, that's your ultimate editing tool, but we're going to handle that very last, okay? So we'll come back to that. But what we are going to do is we're going to go to the Annotate tab. And under here now, you've got lots of tools. So these are all little editing tools right in here, and then we got a few that are down in here, okay? So those are going to be editing tools. The other way we've got editing tools are what we call grips. And when you select a dimension, you get these subsets of tools, okay? So we have the editing tools up here, we have grip editing tools, and then we're going to have dim styles. Those are going to be kind of our ultimate. Oh, and there's a fourth one. Don't let me get away from this until we do it. Properties is going to be one of your ultimate tools to override dimensions once you get things done. So let's look at grips first. Grips are really, really cool little tools. So if you select a dimension, okay, notice it highlights. These guys are grips. So they allow you to do things like stretch, move. So if I want to move the depth point here, I select the depth point, and notice I can slide it left or right. So if I want to put that guy to the midpoint of this line, shift right click midpoint, select the midpoint, and bang, there's your tool. So that's a real easy way of placing or replacing depth point locations. I can click on that and I can move the dimension line. Sometimes the text will move. So if I click the text, in this case, it allows me to move it in the dimension line or out of the dimension line, but notice it's keeping me locked with the dimension line. So that one again depends on what the settings are in the dim style. So again, just click on it, click the grip, drag it. And notice, depending on the type of dimension you have, you're going to have different grips. So for instance, if I come over here, there's a grip for the arrowhead, and there's a grip for the text location. And there's a grip here, but it ain't going to let me do, well, it does actually. It's letting me do some stuff, but that just kind of whacks it out. So that's not one you probably want to do too much. Okay. All right, so here's some other really cool grip tools. If you click on your dimension and you right click, you're going to typically get shortcuts. Okay, so notice there's a dim style, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, or precision. I love this little precision one Because if I want to knock down the precisions really quick, I just go precision, bang, make that 2. Come over here, I can click those 3, right click, precision, 2 decimal places, just like that. That little tool, by the way, I found doesn't work in Civil 3D for some reason. So I guess they disabled it. Don't know why. All right, you guys getting that to work?
Gotta run. See you later.
Okay, this will be posted. All right, anybody problems with that? Seeing how nice that is? All right, let's watch this now. Also with grips, when you select the grip, okay, this is referred to as a cold grip. If you let your cursor get sucked into that, it becomes what's called a hover grip. And then notice in that hover state, you can stretch your dimension, continue off of it, baseline, or flip arrow. So notice what I just did. I just flipped the arrow. So these are really cool tools. Hover it, flip arrow. And actually flipping that arrow, that's really hard to do any other way. So again, I grip it, hover grip it, flip arrow. And depending on what you touch on the dimension, your hover grips will give you different options. So if I click on this and I hover grip that, notice I can move the text with the dimension line, or I can move the text only. So notice it's going to allow me to move that. It looks like they're disassociated, but they're really not. And I can hover grip that, and I can say, well, I want to move that with a leader. So when I move that, as that moves, it'll do a leader. So there's all these different settings that you can get into. So those grip editing tools are really, really nice. Right? And I think you'll have text hover grips options. You're going to have for the arrowhead, you get ones, and I think you'll get some also for the def point. No, actually, there are not too many. Okay. All right. Anybody getting that to work? I'm going to undo that back. Everybody okay? You trying those out?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's let me see what I want to do here. All right, so there's some nice little tools down here, but I want to show you. If you type in, there's 2 commands you can type in, and it's kind of worth knowing what they are. One is called dim edit, okay, and the other one is called dim t edit. So you have 2 commands, dim edit and dim t edit. Both of these are text editing commands, okay? That's about all they do. And here, primarily, these are what you're seeing. These are the same things. So notice this is actually called an oblique command, but you'll notice it's actually dim edit. And I think that one's also dim t edit. So there's a difference in what you get between the 2. If you select t edit, let's see, this guy right here, text angle. What this allows you to do is select a dimension that you want to edit, and then you give it an angle like, say, 30 degrees. And what it does is it rotates it. Now, if you want to do that with multiple objects, let me try something real quick. I got to check this out. Yeah. All right. So by typing it in, if you type in, you get a lot more options that you can use. So if you type in dim edit, let's do that. Dim edit. All right. What pops up here is what's called home, new, rotate, or oblique. If you go to the rotate option here, we can type in 30 degrees. So instead of just doing it 30 degrees one at a time, what this will allow me to do is select all my dimensions. So I can just type in the word all. It'll select every dimension object out there, and then you just hit enter, and it did it it did it all at one shot. So dim edit allows you to do multiple dimensions at one time. Dim T edit only allows you to do a single dimension at a time. And most of the commands up here are actually dim T edit. These are single options at a time. Okay. If you type in dim edit though, you get more options. Are you guys seeing how that works? Everybody? Any questions on that? Okay. All right. Let's take a look at obliquing. Obliquing is not something that you would do too often, and this one conveniently can be found right here. So if we go to oblique, like right there, we select the object that we want to oblique. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little bit of an angle, so we're going to kick it. I'm going to type in 30 degrees and then hit enter. And oops, that didn't work. Try that again. Select the object and then just enter the angle. I don't think I hit enter the first time. So this is referred to as an oblique angle. So you got to understand it's not giving me the distance this way. It's still giving me the distance here. So it's kind of a weird way of doing it. Like I said, some disciplines, particularly like mechanical guys, they would not use that. That would not be legal in a lot of different types of disciplines. Okay, so we're not going to use that too often, but it's nice to know that it's there. Any questions? Anybody's having so far? There's a lot of really cool little editing tools, and you kind of have to use them a little bit to get used to them. All right, I'm going to take this guy and undo it back to its normal state. All right. Okay, I want you to do a couple things for me. I want you to drop another dimension down. We're going to just do a linear, and I want you to go from that endpoint to that endpoint, but drag it across so you're coming across a dimension like that. So you notice we've got dimension lines crossing. And you might have a dimension line crossing this guy. Okay. So this is extremely bad practice right here. Okay. So what you normally want to do is break one dimension so that it doesn't cross across the other, or actually you can break two dimensions if you want. So they've got this little really cool tool up here. It's called a dimension break. So you select that. You select the dimension that you want to produce the break on, and then you hit enter. And notice what it does. It will just break that dimension line so that it's not running through it. And this is a really intuitive little tool, so that if this guy gets moved so that he's not crossing anything, well, he always knows where to break. And that one didn't break for some reason. That should have been breaking, but yeah, but it's maybe it didn't. Oops, not doing what I want it to do. Yeah, but see, that break stays on. So like this guy, I could break the arc. So if I wanted to do another dimension break, select the object, turn it on, it's broken. And as this arc changes size, it should break. It recognizes where it's crossing something. And it will also recognize other objects. So it doesn't only just recognize dimension objects. If it comes through a line or a piece of text or something, it will also break. And that little tool is just kind of like a toggle. So you break it on, break it off. So it's real simple to use. And once it's turned on, it stays on. But this is something that you definitely want to do. You don't want to ever cross dimension lines without breaking one of them or both of them, kind of thing. Any questions on that? Okay. So there's a couple more editing tools until we get to the dim style, and the dim style is the ultimate editing tool. So properties is a really wonderful way of editing dimensions. So we're going to click on this dimension right here that we've laid down, the one that we broke. And what we're going to do is get to the properties of this dimension. And what this does is basically lets us go in and ratchet all the things apart about it. So when you have a dimension, there's about maybe 50 what are called dimension variables that go together to produce the way it looks. So one would be the arrow, the size of the arrow, the extension line, whether it's on or off, the colors, the size of the text, the type of text. So we're going to see that when we get into dim styles. I'll go through those with you. But what we can do is we can go in the back door here, and through properties, we can adjust any of these things that we want to. So if we right click, we got properties at the bottom. It will pull up the properties dialog box for you. A lot of times it comes in over on the side, and you can size this thing. So if it's too big or too small, like I can make it a little bit smaller like that. Just want to be able to read it for the most part. So what we see is you have general properties, colors, layers, line types, all of that kind of stuff. But then you start getting down into the dimensions, and this is where you start getting in these. And these are all, notice all of those things go together to make that dimension work. And those are called dim variables. So there's quite a few of them. Now, not all of them are that important, but so notice arrow 1, arrow 2. So for instance, if I want to change that, you can click on arrow 1 and you could find a different type of one called dot. So notice what I did is I changed that from a dot to an arrowhead, change the arrow size. In this case, let's go down to what we call extension lines 1 and 2. Notice they're both on. Okay, so if I want to turn them off, I can simply go down here, turn it off, click the other one, turn it off. And then I can close this dialog box, hit the escape key, and notice now that that's what you got going on there. So you can really go in and tweak a dimension, but if you have to do that a bunch of times, you don't want to do that a bunch of times because that's going to be a real kind of time-consuming thing. But if I have this guy set up the way I want it now, what I could do is do what's called a match props. So match props is a really awesome little tool too. If we go back to Home tab, under the properties dialog box, you'll see this guy called match props. So under match props, you select the one that you have as your base. And then we're going to do what's called our destination. So I think they call this the target. So any of these that I click on, it's going to change that. So notice it changes that one, changes that one, and changes that one. So it's a quick way of getting one edit done. Now notice I lost all my extension lines, and that doesn't necessarily make sense, but that's what I got, how that works. You guys seeing how that works kind of? So properties allows you to go in and really fritz around with all these things. And then the match props allows you to apply those changes very rapidly. Okay, any questions? Okay. So the ultimate editing tool is what's called a dim style. And first of all, what we've done here, we have done what's called an override. So we have overridden the original styles on this dimension. I think a quick way of getting rid of your overrides is that you select the object, you hit this remove style overrides, it changes it back to what its initial setting was. So if you do kind of mess something up, you don't like it, you can always bring it back to its normal state. All right. So a style, let's talk about that. We talked about text styles, and a text style is pretty simple. It drives how your text object works. So with a dimension, a dimension style, or what we call a dim style, drives how your dimension looks. And it's way more complex than anything that you've dealt with. And like I said, it's a good thing to kind of take a look at, because once we get into Civil 3D, Civil 3D is all about styles. Everything is a style. It's style driven. It works not exclusively, but extensively with styles. So if you go to the web page or Blackboard site, under this I do have your dim styles. I think I showed you that earlier. So if you want to have a handy copy of this, it's printed out for you, so you can use that. And I've got it down in several boxes. So we're gonna take a look at this now. Now there's a lot to this, and we're not going to get into all the nuts and bolts of it. We don't need to for what we're doing, but just so you know that this is available to you. Okay, so let's go back to AutoCAD. All right, so right now these guys look a certain way because they're being driven by that dim style that's current. And so if we are at the Home tab, we can go to the Annotate drop-down, and you will see dim style right there, right below the text style. And any text or dim style that you create only exists in this drawing. So if I open this up, they actually have one dim style currently. It's called Standard. Okay. Another location you can get to your dim styles if you go to the Annotate, and under the Dimension panel, this little arrow going that way, that'll get you to dim style. And a third way is just type in the word DDIM, and it'll drop you into the dim style. Okay, so doesn't really matter where we are, so I'm just going to click it right here. So this is your dim style manager. Okay, and we're going to take a look at the different parts of it. I'm not going to show you each and everything because, you know, first of all, we don't need to do that much of it, and you can figure this out on your own. Okay, so, all right, so what we're going to do is, first off, here's when we actually create a dim style. I'm going to recommend you always leave Standard as a template so that you don't override it. Okay, so right now I'm not going to worry about that because we're not going to make any changes. So if we want to see the actual parameters of the Standard, we're going to go over here to the Modify tab. Okay, so what we're looking at is this is where all the nuts and bolts happen on your dimension. And it's broken down into tabs. At the top, starts out with the Line tab. Then we have the Symbols and Arrows tab, Text, Fit, Primary Units. If you were using alternate units, which means you may have both metric and imperial on at the same time, you would get into the alternate units tab. And then tolerancing really has more to do with mechanical. So we're not going to look at these last two tabs. So we're just going to do the lines through the primary units. Okay. So let's start out at the Lines tab. So what it's kind of broken down to pretty nicely. These boxes, by the way, are really awesome because they really kind of drive everything for you. The other thing is you have this guy called an image tile right here, and whatever you're making changes in here, it'll be reflected in the image tile for the most part. That's not true 100%, but for the most part. So it starts out with dimension lines and then extension lines. And under the dimension lines, you can do things like change the color, the line type, and the line weight. So these are overrides. If it says by block, by block, by block, what it's doing is it's reading your layer information. So I don't normally override these guys. I usually leave them go. Extend beyond ticks. What that means is if you have an arrowhead that's called an architectural tick, this dimension line is going to go past the extension line. Notice right now it's grayed out, and that's because I have an arrowhead. Baseline spacing. Baseline spacing is this spacing here, and we said that was becoming that was an automatic number, and that's what that's doing. Suppress extension line 1 or dimension line 1 or 2. You just click that on. Notice it gets rid of 1, gets rid of 2, or you can get rid of both. Okay, so the image tile is really cool because it's showing you all that. Again, extension lines. You can override your colors, line weights, line types, suppress extension line 1, suppress extension line 2, or you can suppress both. So you can have them generated that way. If everything's that way, then it just it works that way. Extend beyond dimension line. That's the distance from the arrowhead to here. So you'll notice from the arrowhead to that point, what's happening is that's the distance that it's using. Origin offset is the distance from the def point to where the extension line starts. So those values, I don't normally mess with any of those. I usually leave them alone, but there will be an occasion that you need to beef up the origin from the offset. Otherwise, what happens is it looks like the extension line runs into the part, and that's something that we never want to do. Okay, let's go over to symbols and arrows. So this is basically your arrowheads. So we have first arrowhead, second arrowhead, and again, if you drop this guy down, you'll notice there's just there's quite a few different arrowheads to choose from. You can set it to none, and you can create your own, what's called a user arrow. So if you have an arrowhead that's something completely unique, you can create a block, and then you can use it. Right? Normally, one thing to recognize is that normally the arrowhead left and right is the same. You don't normally do what I did here. I have a dot and then an arrow, so that can be done, but it's not typical. The size of the arrowhead is the size from the tip to the tail of it. Okay, one thing about the arrowhead size, what's really important, whatever your arrowhead size is, you want your text height to be the same. So text height and arrow size are always going to be the same. Okay, center marks. On arcs, circles, ellipses, the center mark here, if you set it to none, notice that disappears. If you set it to mark, you get this little guy. And if you do it to line, notice you get that kind of look to it. So it's set to mark by default. The size of this is the distance from the center over to the edge. Okay, so that's your 0.0. Okay, your break, when we broke those dimensions, the distance that it uses to break with, that's what this setting is for dimension breaks. For the arc line symbols we had over here, you can either have it preceding it, above it, or you can set it to none. So you do have the ability to change those. Okay. Now let's go to text. So text, this one's pretty important. Well, they're all important, but this one, you have a style that it uses that it feeds into the mText object. And what you need to do is, let's go to this little button right here. This is going to take me to the text style dialog box. When you create a text that you're going to use for dimensions, the height here should always be 0. If you set a height value other than 0 in your text style, what it's going to do is it is going to override what this value says here. Okay, so whatever I decide to use here, okay, I'm always going to make it a 0 height setting. That's very important. You can override your text color. You can have a fill color. You can do some other cool stuff. Placements, I can have it centered vertically, or I can have it above. Notice how it does that. I use the above a lot. Horizontal center is going to be pretty typical. Text alignment, either it's always going to be horizontal, or you're going to align it. And I think civils, we use the aligned option more often than not, typically. The offset from dimension line is the distance it uses from that to that point. That's your vertical setting. All right, the fit option. Fit option is probably one of the hardest areas to use, but normally what I do is I just let everything be what it says here. I'm going to use what's called best fit for fit options, and I'm going to let the text placement be what it says there. So I don't, there's a lot of tweaks in here, and you kind of have to play with them a lot to understand them. But for in general, and the kind of stuff that we're going to be doing, we can get by with setting those two things, you know, as their defaults. But what we do want to do is be aware of here. If you're using paper space, what you want to do is make sure you set the scale dimensions to layout mode, because what that will do, that allows you to dimension your part in paper space, even though the part is in model space. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that on Wednesday, because that is like the best thing. That allows you to keep your dimensions on your paper, but your model in your model space. So it keeps them separate. Okay. So again, normally fit has a lot of options into it, but you have to kind of play with it to get to it. And again, we're not going to be doing that much dimensioning, so we don't need to do too much of that. But normally, if you're using paper space, you're going to want to always toggle that on, and by default, it's usually turned off. Okay. So primary units is the last thing we'll look at. Basically, this sets up your unit you're using for your angles and your distances, what the precision will be, and then what things like suffixes and those kind of things. So notice for the linear units, you have decimal, fractional, scientific, architectural, engineering, and then they have this other one called Windows Desktop, which I'm not even sure what that does. I've never used it. But yeah, if you're under decimal, then you can set it to your precisions. If you're under fractional or architectural, then you're going to get feet and inch readout, and you can set it to your precision. For instance, if you have a decimal, it's not going to give you any unit like what we have here. So if you want a unit of inches, you would come down to your suffix and you put the inch symbol in, like right there. Oops, I got out of there for some reason. Now, this is kind of weird because I hate the way this works, but if you put a suffix, if this says linear dimension and you put a suffix in here, you will get a suffix over here on your angles too. So if I put the inch symbol, it's going to give me the inch symbol here, even though it says degrees. So you really have to be careful with that. And I do think, for some reason, AutoCAD's never fixed that. I think that's wrong, but that's the way that works. So you got to get used to that. The other thing is on linear and angular types of things, you can have what's called zero suppression. So you can suppress leading zeros. So if it's like 0.012, you can just say 0.012 kind of thing, or you can delete trailing zeros. So those are also settings, and you have suppression, zero suppressions, leading and trailing on both linear and angular. Okay. So we're going to go through. Let's cancel out of there. We're going to go through and create a new dim style. And what I'm going to do is I don't want to write on top of standard. Okay, I don't want to write on top of standard. So what I'm going to do is create a new style here. And it's going to call it copy of standard. So that's fine. What I want to do here is make sure that I call it something unique. Now I'm just gonna, we can use copy of standard. I'm just gonna call this demo for today. And I want you to also notice down below here, it says for all dimensions. So there are things in here that you have what are called parent and child dimensions. So notice if you drop this down, you can do all dimensions, but you can do linears only, angulars only, radius, ordinate, diameter. What's really cool about this option is that you can create a parent that has certain characteristics, but then when you do let's say an angular, it can have characteristics that are a little bit different than the parent. So this is what they call a parent-child relationship. So we're going to do that because I want to show you it's really, really useful. If you create a new style, though, you always want to create for all dimensions first. So that's what we call the parent style. So we're going to call it demo, all dimensions, and then we're going to continue. Okay. Is everybody with me? Anybody lost?
Nope.
Okay. All right, let's start out with lines. Now we're gonna make some changes, not because we would normally do this, but I just want to show you how this kind of works. So I'm gonna, let's see, I don't know if I want to make any changes on this. I think I'm gonna leave my lines alone. I think we'll be okay with that. All right, so I do want to now go to symbols and arrows. Okay. So one of the things I always find is 0.18 is usually really big for most things I do. So I usually crank my my arrow size down. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make the arrow size down to, let's say, 0.1. Okay. And I think we're going to leave the arrows alone for now. Let's go to text. Okay, so standard is an Arial font. Let's go out and create a new font. So we're going to create a new font, or style, I guess I should say. We'll call it Style 1. Instead of using Arial, let's use Times New Roman. So Times New Roman. Make it regular. Make sure that the height is 0. Everything else is just as the way we want it. So then we're going to hit OK, apply, and then we're going to close it. So what you've done is actually gotten out of the dim style dialog box into the text style dialog box, and we created it. So this thing is now available as Style 1 here. Okay. So under Style 1, remember we set the height of the arrow to 0.1. So we want to do the same thing here, 0.1. All right, I'm going to set my text so that it's above and that it's aligned with the dimension line, if it's not already set that way. Let's see. Yeah, I want it aligned, okay? And I want it above. All right, let's not worry about the fit. We're going to just leave those alone. We're not doing anything in paper space right now, but we normally will set that up like that. All right, primary units. Let's go to primary units. Let's set our units to decimal, and we'll set our primary units to precision of let's do a precision of 2, and we'll put a suffix. Well, we're not going to put a suffix in there because if we do that, then it shows up in my angles. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on this. And then we're going to close this. Okay. So if you are looking at dim styles now, well, let's see. Let's go back to the Home tab real quick. If you go to the Annotation panel under Dimensions, you'll notice there's now 2 dim styles that show up. These are now both current in your drawing. Well, I should say that they're both part of your drawing. Demo is the one that's current. So watch what happens now when we do a dimension. So if you go here and you do a linear dimension, from that point to that point, notice the difference in the look between this is your standard dimension and this is your demo dimension. And I can switch this. If I click on that, right click, and go to dim style, I can take it to the demo very easily. Okay, is everybody getting that to work for them? Is that working?
Yep.
All right, let's come over here. Let's delete some of these guys because I want to show you what's now. This is going to now get pretty interesting. So let's, on that circle, on the circle, let's go ahead and do a radius dimension and a diameter dimension. Okay, and I want you to notice how they look quite a bit different now. So because the parent is driving the way this looks, and it looks different than standard, right? Everybody get the idea on that, right? Okay, so now we're going to make some changes that are going to be unique to the type of dimension that we're dealing with, okay? So we're going to go to Annotate. We're going to go to Dim Style. Click on Demo. What we're now going to do is create what's called a child off of this. So we're going to make some tweaks so that what's going to happen in let's say, linear is going to be different than what's going to happen in angular. So what I'm going to do here is go to New, and it's going to say Copy of Demo. But what we're going to do is say, no, I don't want to make a copy. I want to change a linear. So I'm going to make what's called a linear child. So notice when you click on linear, this automatically grays out. Go ahead and hit Continue. What you should notice now at the top of this dialog box is you should say demo : linear. So this is literally parent : child. So now what we're doing is we're tweaking only the linear dimensions and not anything else. So I'm going to start out with lines now. We are going to make some changes that are just going to be kind of outrageous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my dimension red. So it's going to override that color that's currently green. And we're going to go to symbols and arrows. And I'm going to make the first arrow an architectural tick. And I'm going to make the second one a closed fill. Now again, I'm just doing some outrageous stuff so that you can just see it. Let's go to text. Let's use style 1. I think we'll go ahead and do that. But if you want, you could tweak the color. I'm going to tweak the color. I'm going to make it yellow. Again, we're just doing this so that we can see it. Primary units, let's make that say a suffix of inches. Okay. Go ahead and hit OK. Close it. And you'll notice now that any dimension that you created with that is now taken on that style. But I want you to understand that this is also that same style, but notice these guys are not reflecting this style because they're different. Okay, so everybody get the idea? Even though this and this dimension are governed by the same style, because a linear dimension is separate or different from a radial dimension or a diameter dimension, they're going to look different. So we're going to tweak those up too. So we're going to go back into annotate. Just did. Get that guy put back in there. I'm going to go to my dim style. Notice now when you go to dim style, it has this little thing that says linear that's coming off a demo. That literally means parent : child. Okay. All right, so we are going to go to demo. We are going to go to new. We're going to this time tweak radius dimension. Continue. All right, so for lines, let's make this line, we'll make it magenta. Let's go to text. Let's create the text. Let's use standard on this one. I want to go to primary units. I'm going to go to decimal be fine, but let's make it 4 decimal places. And again, let's give it a suffix of inches. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Close it. And you'll notice now that this guy is reflecting the new changes. So again, these are the same style, except it knows that when you do a radius dimension, it's going to be different than when you do a diameter dimension. And it'll be different when you do a linear dimension. And if we go back to our dim style, you'll notice you now have parent is demo, and you have 2 children off of that, a linear child and a radial child. Are you guys getting the idea in this? It's a little bit different. It takes you a little bit getting used to, but if you learn how to use this, this is really the keys to how you do anything in dimensioning. And the styles, again, they drive everything and every type of dimension within that. Is that working for everybody?
Yeah.
Any questions on it? Are you guys getting the concept?
Yeah.
Let's just do one more, okay? I'm going to do an angular one real quick. So I'm going to just go demo, new. There should be one for angular dimensions. Let's continue. Let's just jump right to units. I'm not going to change anything else up, but I'm going to go to units. I'm going to go to degrees, minutes, seconds, and take it to the nearest second. Okay that, and okay that. And these 2 guys, if I switch these guys, click on that one and click on that one and take that to my dim style called demo, they'll update. So styles, dimension styles in particular, they are definitely the name of the game. That's your ultimate editing tool. Now you can still go over and overwrite. And again, if I've got dimensions down there that are already in place, all I got to do is click on them, right click, change the style from one to the other. So I can go to demo, and I can equally come back and make these standard. And it's not uncommon to have multiple styles in one drawing. Okay, so you can't do everything with usually a single style, and you can't do everything with parents and children. So so it just depends on what you're doing and how much you do it. And the more you use them, the better you'll get at it, just like anything else. And as I said, this is a really, really good way of taking a look at how dimensions will work, or I guess I should say labeling works in Civil 3D, because it uses the same concept. The dialog boxes are a lot different looking, but it's really the same concept. Okay, any questions? Okay, I forgot to mention one thing about editing, and then we're going to take a look at multi-leaders. So we talked about grip editing and all the different types of editing tools. So one of the tools that you can use to edit text with is to just double click on the text. So if you just find a piece of text and you double click on it, it will open up the the text editor, in-text editor. So you do have the ability to do things like change the height in here. So if you highlight that, you can change the height in there. You can change the, oops, I didn't edit. I can change, like, I can make that 0.1. So let's go ahead and just, I want you to see, let me get out of here a minute. Go ahead and double click on that again. Let's just highlight that and make that 10. And if you want to, you can put the suffix after it. Okay, so once you've done that, go ahead and hit enter or escape. So notice that's 10 inches. That's what it should be. But what happened is, by typing that in using the dim text, the multi-line text editor, you've locked this dimension up. Here's what I mean by that. Notice if you take this guy and you take his grip and you drag him out here, he still says 10. If I drag him here, he still says 10. So no matter where I drag it, it's not reflecting what the number should be. So when you type that in, you're locking up the dimension. Okay, so if you ever do that, here's how you fix that, because you really don't want to do that. You haven't destroyed the dimension, you've just locked up the text. So what you do is you just double click, highlight it, and you're going to put the less than and greater than symbol. And when you do that, it brings it back to normal. So that's where you're basically saying, oh, type in the default. Once I do the less than greater than symbol, then you hit OK. This dimension is now unlocked. So what happens is when I grip it, notice it'll update just like it should. So be careful if you're going to edit your text. Really stay away from the text itself. You can do things like edit a suffix. You can add a, oops, won't let me do it, but you can add things like suffixes to it or prefixes to it, but just stay away from the text itself. For some reason, it won't let me get in there. Yeah, but anyway, so in general, I would be careful doing that. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a look at what's called a multi-leader now. Multi-leaders are really actually pretty cool little guys. If you want to, you can just go ahead and delete your dimensions if you want. We're not going to use them, or just leave some. You can leave some in place if you want. So multi-leaders are a way of adding textual information. And they're really not a dimension in the sense that dimensions are truly going out and harvesting information from your objects. Okay, lengths, angles, those kind of things. dimension, multi-leaders are not going to be doing that. They're just going to be something that you can type to the object, but they are referenced to the object, which is kind of cool. So if the object moves, the multi-leader will move with it. It gets the term multi-leader because you can add more than one kind of leader line to it. Under the Home tab, you'll have, under the annotation panel, right here, you'll have multi-leaders. That's your multi-leader creation tool. This is how you add a leader or remove a leader. You can align them up if they're all together. So there's ways to do that. Then you also have a dialog box or a multi-leader style. So this is your multi-leader style tool. And I did give you in here, let's see, I gave you a multi-leader style dialog box. It's not anywhere near as involved as the dimension one is, but it kind of works the same way. So let's go ahead and take a look at multi-leaders. They're really, really easy to execute. So just keep in mind, there's a style right now for the multi-leader. It's called standard, and I think there's just one right now. That's the only one. So to create it, it's real simple. You just click on your multi-leader style tool. You just pick a point, and I'm gonna like say go to an end point or a midpoint, and you just pull it out, and then it'll automatically go into mText. So let's say we're gonna say paint this green. And when you're done, you just hit your close up here, and there's your multi-line or multi-leader. So notice it only has a single leader at this point. And notice also if I move the part, the multi-leader goes with it. So it's linked to it. The multi-leader can also be moved around really freely. I do this all the time. So if I want to like change this guy over to here, it's real simple to do. Move that up like that. Or flip the text. I can just drag the text in different locations like that, okay? Easy to edit. You just double click on the text. You're back into the text editor and you can change it. Okay, so this guy's a lot easier to use. So once we create a multi-leader, we can add multi-leaders to it. So if I come here, I can do an add multi-leader. You select the one you want to add them to, and then you can pick, endpoints, and then another one, and another one. So you can just keep adding them. And it's really cool the way it lines up because the position on the text will determine how the multi-leaders come out. So notice if I bring them over here, how they flip. They're very intuitive the way they work. And I use these quite a bit, actually. They're a cool little tool for doing annotations. And you're going to see in Civil 3D, there are little tools that basically use multi-leaders that do kind of the same thing, except they will go out and actually harvest information for you, which is even cooler. You don't have to then type in anything. So if I have my multi-leader in place, again, I can place him, move him. And if I want to, whoops, that didn't do it. So let's say I want to delete a multi-leader, really simple. You just come up here, hit remove, select the multi-leader, and select the multi-leader to remove. And that highlights, and then you just hit enter, and they're gone. So I can add them, and I can remove them freely. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Really easy tool to use. And I got this next assignment. We're going to do a little bit of dimensioning, a little bit of multi-leaders, but I'm kind of setting the stage again because once we get into Civil, we're going to be kind of doing combinations of using their tools, but we're also going to be utilizing this. So you can still annotate freely in Civil 3D, and knowing how to do this is really helpful. So let's take a look at the multi-leader style. It's really simple to edit. So we're going to go into annotation. This is your multi-leader M style, multi-leader style. So it looks really kind of similar. They have one out there called standard. You got new and modify. Let's just go to modify real quick and look at the different parts. So there's only 3 boxes in the multi-leader style, and they're pretty simple. Let's start out with leader format first. So leader format, you have basically 2 types, what are called straights, and then they have another one called a spline. And the spline is going to give you a kind of a curve thing, so that's kind of a cool one. I like to use that. I use them both, actually. It just depends. Some people, again, it might be discipline specific, but then you can change their color. You can override color, override line type, override line weight. You have the same arrowhead kind of concept going on, and you have that break line. So we've already kind of seen some of that. So then you have leader structure. Basically, how is it constrained? 2 points would basically be the pick point of the arrowhead and then the point up here. But if you want to get more than that, you can do that. You can also set angles up and all kinds of stuff. A landing. This guy's always called a landing right here. So most people use that landing. But if you don't want to use a landing, you can toggle it off, or you can always set it to a preference on the angle. If you are going to be utilizing multi-leaders in a paper space mode, it's important to make sure that you set that to in layout, okay? So again, if we're using that, which we will be a lot, this is nice because what this will do is scale everything for you properly. And again, I'll show you guys that a little bit on Wednesday. It makes a little bit more sense. Content is dealing primarily with your text and your text symbols. So usually it uses what's called an mText object, but you also have these other things that are called blocks. So under blocks, you can get these things like callouts, circles, and slots, and those are kind of neat. Particularly like architects and other disciplines will use that. But normally, I usually pretty much always use that mText option. If I do that, then it'll tell me what text style to use, how it's going to keep that, like horizontal, or at some right angle. You can have text colors, height values, and then the attachments are important. You have a horizontal attachment, vertical attachment, and then also what happens to the left. So this would be the left side, and then over here would be right. So they can be different. And the gap, landing gap, is the distance between the landing and the text itself. So this box is really pretty easy to use. But we're going to go ahead and change this up. And they don't have like parents and children in this one, so it makes it a little bit simpler. So we're going to just cancel out of there. We're going to generate a new one. And again, I don't ever want to use a standard. I don't ever want to override it, in other words. So I'm going to always create my own. So I'm just going to call this demo. And we're going to continue. And let's go to the leader format. So in this one, instead of doing straights, I'm going to show you what the spline does. This is kind of a cool little leader. I'm going to set it to that. I'm going to just leave these defaults here. Let's go to the leader structure. Maximum points, we'll just toggle that off, so that gives you as many or an unlimited number of points if you want to use them. And then the content, I'm just going to leave that alone as well. So we're going to go ahead and OK this. We've created a new style called demo. And when we close this, it actually becomes the current style. So now if I place a multi-leader, I can just pick a point. I can keep picking points because I set it to unlimited. And notice you get this curly kind of looking thing. And when you hit enter, it'll take you over to your mText dialog box, enter your text, whatever you want it to be, and there you have it. So they're going to be really simple to use. Okay, very simple. Okay. Any questions anybody has about that? We're going to do a little bit of multi-leadering, not too much. We're going to do a little bit more with the parts that or the dimensions. Yeah, couldn't think of the word. Okay, any questions? Okay, well, while I've got you here, because we're running in really good time, I'm going to just show you some things about really paper space dimensioning real quick. So what I'm going to have you do is let's just go ahead and we're going to delete everything that we've got here showing up. And I want to go to my dim style. And we're going to go to the dim style that we just created. And what I want to do is modify it. So what we want to do is go to the fit section. And I want you to set this up so that it's going to go to scale, dimensions, and layout. So the reason that this is important is that when you're doing paper space kinds of things, that it will work for you very well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hit OK and close that. Now make sure, by the way, I just want to make sure everybody was right. We can just check this. Make sure you were on demo when you did the modify. And go to fit. Make sure that says that. Okay. And everybody good with that? And we're going to go to layout 1 or 2. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to have you open up 2 viewports. We're not going to worry about the size of them right now. I just want to go ahead and type in MView. Pick an MView just kind of like right there. And I want you to pick another MView kind of right next to it. Okay, double click in that first one and just kind of zoom up so you can see that part in it. Don't worry about its scale factor. Just want you to get one in there just so that it fills the viewport. Okay. And once you do that, you can lock it if you want. Double click inside this one and pan it. And I want you to zoom up so that you can kind of see just the piece of that top. Once you get that locked in, go ahead and do that. Lock it. Double click outside. Okay. So you can do dimensions 2 different places. You can do dimensions in model space, or you can do them in paper space. So I want you to go to model space now. We're going to come in here, and I want you to do a dimension for me. We're going to do a linear dimension from here to here, and then we're going to do one from here to here. So I want you to look at that. You can see it. Go back to your layout. Do you notice how it's showing up in both? But the arrow sizes are different. Can you see that? And the text is, well, let's change our text color. That text color is horrible. Let's go to this. I can't see my text color, so I'm going to just change that text color. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's do this again. Let's just delete those. Let's go to, instead of using demo, let's use standard, because that'll show up better for us. And we got to make one change in standard. Make sure that that says under fit, scale, dimensions, and all layout. Okay, so now let's go ahead and dimension it. It should show up better now. Okay, so now when we go to our layout, I think you can see this now. Do you notice how these are some completely different sizes? Does everybody see that? They're different sizes. The arrows and the text are different sizes in the viewports, and they're showing up in both viewports. So all of that's really bad. Okay, so what we can do, there's a better way to do this dimensioning. I'm going to go ahead to model space. I'm going to delete these guys. Back to paper space. And then what we're going to do is dimension it on paper. So make sure that you're in the paper right here. here on the paper. I'm going to do a linear. I'm going to pick the endpoint of that object and the endpoint of that object. What I'm actually doing it is on the paper. I'm going to do it again from here to here. And then I'm going to do it over here. What you should notice is that these are exactly the same heights now. And even though this viewport is zoomed in tighter than this, it's still saying 3 inches, which is really pretty cool. So if I go back to the model, those dimensions don't exist on the model. They only exist on the paper. So again, these guys are actually now paper space objects. If I delete this viewport just to show you, notice that object is still sitting there. Okay. Another thing that's kind of cool about this, sometimes this works right off the bat and sometimes it doesn't. If I go in and unlock this and I pan the model, the dimension goes with it. So they're kind of linked. And if I change the scale factor here, it'll also go with it. So it's a really cool process. So when you're using paper space, in general, I normally would suggest that you do your dimensioning in paper space as opposed to doing it in the model. Because otherwise you're going to have to deal with freezing things in other viewports. And also your dimensions are never going to line up. They're never going to look the same heights. Now, there is a second way you can do this. You can actually double click inside the viewport and you can do the dimension. And you'll notice by doing that, they do look like they're the same heights. Well, I just blew that out. Hold on a minute. They do look like they're the same heights, but the problem is this guy now showed up over here as well. And so paper space dimensioning is probably the way to go. And because you can link your objects, it's just the best way to go. So this guy, I really don't want him in there. He shows up all over the place. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Covered a lot of ground. We're not going to be doing much dimensioning, just so you know, but we will be doing some dimensioning creation and some dim style setups, and we'll do some multi-leaders. So the lab on Wednesday is going to be really simple. Shouldn't be that big of a deal, but it does require you to have lab 2 done, and also I've got these graded and marked up, so I will bring those with me. If there's any changes or if you have any mistakes on your geometry, you want to fix that, because that'll reflect back on your objects themselves. Okay, so that's what we're headed on doing on Wednesday, and then next week we'll be talking about blocks, and that'll finish up really our AutoCAD section, and then we'll have a test that following week, and we'll be migrating over, spending the rest of the time in Civil 3D. But all the things that we've kind of been doing here, those are all building things, building blocks that we're going to be getting into that are going to help us do this stuff in Civil. Any questions anybody has? I'm going to go ahead and